All right, what is up, guys? It is Saturday. I got my coffee here. I am ready to go with This Week in Security. As of the time of recording, this is February 6th, so recapping the past week, some pretty interesting articles. I mean, come on, this is security. We always have interesting news, interesting new attacks, malware, all kinds of stuff going on in the space any given week. Let's get right into it. So we got Google Chrome with a 0-day that afflicts Windows and Mac users. All right. Now, I thought this was very fitting to include on the channel because lately we have been exploring buffer overflows. If you guys have been watching my content lately, well, this past week we didn't do any Narnia, but we will be picking that up again. But we did definitely exploit some buffer overflows. Now, if you're not familiar, Google Chrome is actually built off of an open source engine known as the V8 engine. And essentially what was discovered is there's a 0-day, and historically there's been quite a bit of security flaws that have been discovered with Google Chrome's V8 engine because if I'm not mistaken, I think it is written in C or C++ rather. I'm pretty sure it's written in C++, and that requires a lot of very careful programming on behalf of the developers. So if they don't manage their memory properly, you will see buffer overflow. So time and time again, we have seen buffer overflow type attacks in Google Chrome for this reason. So this article it's pretty nice. If you guys want to check it out, it was on Threat Post, Google Chrome 0-day. But they even explained, so they go on to explain here about the V8 JavaScript engine and saying that it's written in C++. That's the reason why, like when you have things that are written in C++, it requires very careful memory management on behalf of the developers. So it's very easy for them to make one little mistake and not properly check the bounds of the memory, and then you could have buffer overflow attacks, right? On things that are written in Java, and what are some other languages here, like Golang, stuff like that, where you're not doing the memory management yourself, the programming language is taking care of it. You don't have to worry about these type of attacks, but especially when you see things written here, it's really fast, but the trade-off is you have to do your own memory management, which makes things pretty difficult and error-prone. But just something interesting to note. I mean, we've seen this many times before, but another thing that I found very interesting, we've been noticing this lately in the space, that security researchers are the ones being targeted a lot of times nowadays. So it says here, Google didn't provide any further details of the attackers exploiting the flaw. Researchers with Malwarebytes on Friday made a general assumption that the attack was used against security researchers working on vulnerability research and development at different companies and organizations. This is one thing we've noticed is, lately these security researchers have been under attack by various malware and exploits and things of that nature. So if you guys watch my channel and you're a security researcher out there, definitely do your due diligence, keep up with what's going on in the space, and best of luck to you guys, for sure. Keep doing what you're doing. It definitely helps the security ecosystem. We'll move right on now. We've been talking a lot about crypto on the channel, both from a perspective of, how can we understand the technology, use the technology, to make money or just to understand it, and also what are the security implications of it? Well, here we go. Here is yet another news article, and you'll see more and more of these as time goes on, of especially things in the malware space making use of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, Monero especially, because Monero is a privacy coin. We're going to be getting into Monero in a future video because it's really important to understand these privacy coins like Dash, Zcash, Monero, stuff like that, because they're probably the closest to security as you can get in the space. So as far as this attack here, this is a brand newly discovered malware strain here. They're calling it Hildegard. And researchers warn that Hildegard malware is part of one of the most complicated attacks targeting Kubernetes. If you're not familiar with Kubernetes, essentially Kubernetes is basically you can manage your clusters. You have like all your containers, whether they're Docker containers or whatever. They don't have to be Docker. You have your containers, right? And they are managed by, you can manage them at scale using this technology here called Kubernetes. Where, I mean, we can here might be a bit more official description, right? Open source container orchestration system for automating computer application deployment, scaling, and management. So basically a way to deploy your Docker containers or whatever it is you're using at scale and manage them easily. Of course, something like this would have a lot of power, right? Would have a lot of control over things. So if you can exploit this, then that's kind of really lucrative for an attacker, right? And they even go into explaining the campaign, which I thought this was very interesting. I'll show you guys the infographic here. Essentially what's going on is an attacker was able to exploit a misconfiguration in a kubelet, which is, I think that's like their own. So you can have Docker containers, and I think you can also have kubelets if you're using like their native platform, right? You have a number of kubelets, and these kubelets make up your Kubernetes cluster. So this really illustrates, because in this case, the attacker leveraged a misconfiguration in the kubelet to gain remote code execution. And I think this is really an important bit of information here, because you could be using technology that does not have any security vulnerabilities by default, right? Like you could have looked into Kubernetes and said, hey, the current version of Kubernetes is secure. If I use this, I'm not going to fall victim to an attack because I am up to date on my software. Everything's patched and secure. But here's the extra piece, right? The administrators that are configuring these kubelets in this Kubernetes cluster, it also relies on them configuring things correctly. A lot of times if you use the default out-of-the-box configuration, you're going to be good. But, companies, they have special use cases and they have their own environment and there are certain needs they have. Sometimes these administrators get a little bit lazy and they configure things in a way that allows themselves open to attacks, like remote code execution in the worst case, most severe case, as happened here, right? So sometimes you have these misconfigurations, and that is not the fault of Kubernetes. That is the fault of the administrators, the people that are configuring these in their environment. So that was the case here. So very important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're a system administrator, whatever administrator, developer, whatever. Even if you're a security guy, it's good to know this. Misconfigurations happen all the time, especially when you're talking about cloud environments and stuff like that. You see that a lot as well in that space. But needless to say, in this scenario, there was a misconfiguration in one of these kubelets, and this one was internet accessible, right? So say you have these 3 nodes here. These 2 are internal on their internal network, not internet facing. You have one internet facing one, and it's misconfigured. They're able to get access to this with remote code execution. So effectively, they were able to run commands from this node, from this system, right? And once they were able to do that, they gained access to this container, and they downloaded something called Teammate. Teammate, basically, if you see me use Tmux before, basically it is Tmux. It's built on top of Tmux. However, it allows you to actually use that over an SSH connection. So basically giving them terminal access to the machine. Get themselves a nice terminal here on their Teammate server. So they downloaded the Teammate client, had that connect to their server, and once they did that, they were able to run their own tools on it, like mass scan, which if you're not familiar with mass scan, it's basically like Nmap, but an alternative to Nmap. And with this, they were able to use mass scan to scan the internal network, and they found these 2 other nodes, or however many other nodes really. Just in this infographic, there's 2 other ones. They're able to find other internal nodes that were also misconfigured. And because they're misconfigured, then they can go ahead and, leverage their connection, thus pivoting, right? Leverage their connection on this node A, the internet-facing one, in order to route their exploits through that to gain access to these other nodes. And once they did that, they uploaded the mining software for Monero on all the different containers, and they got a ton of Monero mining software, and they had it send it to their C2 server, thus getting them quite a bit of Monero. I think it said to the tune of $1,500 approximately. So, and as time goes on and Monero increases in value, that's even more money, right? So that's basically how this went down. One thing to note is, this really illustrates the concept of pivoting. If you're taking the OSCP, this is something that you've probably been learning, and especially in a real-world red teaming environment, red teamers especially are the ones that really need to know this pivoting stuff, right? Here's what's going on. You gain access to one system. As an attacker, just by yourself, without gaining access to the system, you wouldn't be able to communicate with these nodes necessarily if they're not internet-facing, right? But if you can get access, a foothold on the network, as we call it as attackers, you can get that foothold on this system here, and that system, maybe that's like dual nicked, right? Maybe it has access to the external internet and the internal network. It's kind of like a bridge between the two. If you get access to that, you can use this system as a pivot to scan the internal network. Because remember, this system has access to both networks. You as the attacker only have access to one, but if you exploit this, then you can get access to the internal network as well through this system. And so that's basically what it sounds like is happening here. And just a really good article here. Hopefully you guys were able to understand that explanation there. If you're doing OSCP, the reason I bring that up is there's certain boxes you'll exploit in the labs that will have access to other networks that you can pivot through them and exploit systems on those other networks. So, and then moving right along, pretty much a perfect transition from that is ransomware attacks now $1 million enterprise, and they're just talking about how a lot of this cryptocurrency stuff is being used by attackers as well. So you have the mainstream adopters, the institutions buying in, but you also have the attackers that are on the cutting edge that are actually leveraging this stuff as well. So you can't ignore this technology. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Gone are the days where you can just ignore this stuff. This is not 2017 anymore. We are in 2021, and this stuff is more pertinent now than ever. You see even here some quick insights. This was done by Chain Analysis. Basically, Chain Analysis is a company that does a lot of analysis of blockchain transactions and what's going on the ledgers. So what they found is that ransomware payments are responsible for 7% of all funds received by criminal cryptocurrency. And the top earners are Rook. We've heard so much in the past year about the Rook ransomware. Also Maze, Doppelpaymer, NetWalker, Conti, Revel, and a number of others here. And they're basically, criminals are able to launder their funds through Bitcoin and mixing services and stuff like that. And you're seeing it used by criminals this way, but there's also very many legitimate use cases for Bitcoin. So I don't want you guys to be misled into thinking that Bitcoin and Monero and all this stuff are for criminals. Criminals are using them because they have certain properties that are useful to them, but there's a lot of very practical real-world applications, reasons that you guys would want to have these coins. I'm not going to get into them in this video, but definitely when we make the cryptocurrency videos, we'll talk more about those. Mainly it has to do with decentralization and being able to be your own bank and not get screwed over by the central banks and people that have their own interest above yours, right? But that's a whole nother topic for discussion. But money distribution, around 199 deposit addresses received 80% of all funds in 2020. Even smaller group of 25 addresses accounted for 46%. So, but it's saying, yeah, more importantly, besides ransomware operations, several other cybercrime operations have reused the same intermediary money laundering services. So, and even talked about, this is a term I've never heard of before until I saw this article, ransomware as a service. So here's one of the insights it had. It says there are fewer threat actors than initially thought, with many of these groups keep switching from one ransomware as a service to another as they're being lured by better deals. So interesting, a new piece of technology that's emerging here, this ransomware as a service. So, I mean, the hackers have their whole underground infrastructure going on right here. And basically to say that ransomware is not going away, cryptocurrency is not going away. And here's some food for thought for you, right? I see ransomware only increasing when it comes to, laundering it through cryptocurrency and stuff like that, because this cryptocurrency is going up massively. Bitcoin at the time of this is over $40,000. Okay. As recent as, what was it? Last fall, we were at like a $10,000 Bitcoin. We have 4x that since then. So what does that mean? If, say you were an attacker and you got 100 Bitcoin from a victim by installing mining software on their systems, that 100 Bitcoin, let's do a quick calculation here, right? That 100 Bitcoin would have been worth, at the time, $10,000 Bitcoin. That would have been worth $1 million, right? Now we 4x. So that 1 million that you made back then, that's now $4 million. So it's that much more lucrative to extract, crypto from victims using ransomware. So just something to keep in mind. It's getting more lucrative. That's going to lure in more potential threat actors, right? And we've been talking about SolarWinds, I believe last week, and I just wanted to reiterate here how it's the Office 365 email compromise. They're not really sure of exactly how the attacker went in. There's some theories going on right now. One thing they've noticed is that, looking at their environment, it seemed like there was no vulnerabilities in how their Office 365 was configured, and everything must have been up to date and everything. So what they're kind of speculating now is that the SolarWinds employees' credentials may have been compromised, and there also might be some 0 days at play. They're not exactly sure. They're kind of still investigating this. They believe it was a Russian foreign intelligence service. So, we've been talking about this for weeks now, right? Nation state actors. These guys are really advanced, right? This is basically the modern warfare that's going to go on, not land battles with tanks and stuff like that. It's going to be done in cyberspace. So very good time to get in on this space. Very relevant today, the field that we operate in here. But yeah, just talking about just getting that foothold, there's so many different vectors an attacker can get a foothold in. Once he gets that foothold, the possibilities are endless from there. Basically, they got somehow, whether it was through getting access to someone's email credentials or through a 0 day, they got access to an email account with their Office 365 Orion development environment. And from there, they were able to pivot to get more and more severe stuff, sensitive data, and get a stronger and stronger foothold on SolarWinds. That's pretty much the flow, the process flow of an attacker. This one I'll touch on really briefly here. I'm not even familiar with this Chrome extension, but apparently there's one called the Great Suspender that contains malware. And it sounds like this guy sold his extension to another group, and then they were the ones that acted maliciously. But this is just to show you guys, if you guys use a lot of Chrome extensions or even Firefox extensions, be careful with the ones you download. Make sure they're ones that you can trust. In the case of this one was used by millions of users, it says. And it even still later had found to have had malware on it. So really be careful with what you're using out there. It's nice to have great functionality, but that's the trade-off. The more that you have, like with the functionality, the more risk that you're exposing yourself to. So operate with your own risk tolerance and really consider, do you need this extension? Is it something you use? Not this one, obviously, don't use this one, but when it comes to your extensions, right? If you're not using one, get rid of it, because you never know if it could get sold to, another developer, and that developer may act maliciously in the future, right? So yeah, definitely take your own risk tolerance into account. Now, I wanted to cover this article because I feel like this does not get talked about enough, and that is bugs found in embedded devices, right? The IoT, there's a whole nother side of security, and this is not my space by any means, but good to at least have it on your radar. IoT security. There's a lot of, when it comes to hardware, if you understand like electrical engineering and the hardware side, there is a lot of security research you can do. Attackers are, exploiting firmware all the time, and a lot of these IoT devices, it comes from that manufacturing mindset. They're trying to save costs. A lot of times there are vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So, this is a whole nother side to security. If you're interested in the hardware hacking side, that's a whole nother thing you can get into. But Google Firebase hosts Microsoft Office phishing attack. Firebase is basically a development platform for Google apps for mobile, right? If you have a Google phone, if you want to start developing for Google phones, that's where you would create your app, put your app on their app store in Firebase. So basically, there's been a phishing attack where developers are, malicious developers, right? They are embedding a phishing page that tells you to log into your Microsoft account, and it looks legit. They make it look like actual Microsoft login prompt, but really they are harvesting those credentials, and then they're using those to log into your actual Microsoft Office accounts, and then probably I would think they are looking for, getting access to other stuff from there. Because if you can compromise someone's email account, think about all the websites they use. Most of these websites out there, if you think about them, they offer, I forgot my password. Okay, well, let me send your new password to your email address. As an attacker, if you have access to someone's email address, you can just start looking at all the accounts. And chances are, if they have accounts on those websites and they use that email address, that's somewhere they have an email in their inbox. So you can just start going through their inbox, seeing what, getting a feel for what they have accounts on, going to those sites saying, hey, I forgot my password. Oh yeah, no problem. Let me send you an email to reset your password. And then they just reset it, get access to your stuff. And just through getting access to the email, that's one of the most lucrative things, because they can just pivot from there, right? The theme of today is pivoting, basically. That is the theme of this week. A huge, very lucrative tool for attackers. Very core part of the attacker's methodology. So we'll pretty much end it on that note there. A lot to cover today. This video went a bit longer than expected, but if you've been enjoying this content and feel that it's of value, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button so that we can share this out with the world. And I will see you guys in the next video.